Welcome to my Stemma project, my independent collection of creatures with designs based off of STEM topics. And today, I wanted to tackle Pokemon's Eeveelution trope. What makes them so special? And what would it look like if I had something like Eevee, but STEM? Eevee is one of the more popular Pokemons out there, beloved by being a vague dog, cat, fox thing. And that vagueness was intentional, as Eevee's designer, Motofumi Fujiwara, said in a past interview that he wanted the design to be a blank slate, based off of what he thought he saw in the forest as a child. How mysterious and intriguing for a design that's supposed to be plain. But what makes Eevee so special? It could evolve! But a bunch of Pokemon can evolve. However, Eevee was different. They can evolve into 3 different evolutions. 3 different Eeveelutions. Fujiwara designed Jolteon and Flareon, while Vaporeon was designed by Atsuko Nishida, the designer of Pikachu and other designs. Now, this line was made for Pokemon's very first game, meaning that the sprites were going to be displayed on a Game Boy, which didn't have much color on the screen yet. Thus, these monochromatic sprites had to accentuate just how different each of the choices were, while also showing off their respective elements. Jolteon has a spiky silhouette, Flareon looks like a fireball, and Vaporeon has fins, even on their legs. They will later each get bold primary paint colors through Ken Sugimori's illustrations. But how does Eevee achieve these different forms? In the game, you have to give Eevee a special stone, which leads to an irreversible transformation into one of the Eeveelutions. Once you grow them up, you can't go back. But here's the kicker. In those original games, you can't find Eevee in the wild. They are a gift Pokemon, and only one is provided to you, meaning that this is your one shot at evolving them. There's no pressure, as Eevee can evolve whenever you give them the proper stone, but they are hard to use without the stat buffs that the Eeveelutions provide. Speaking of, not only are the Eeveelutions different types, but they also have different stat spreads, yielding different styles of gameplay. If you want another Eeveelution, you'll have to trade with a friend, or glitch out the game. Nevertheless, Eevee represented having different choices in life, the fork in the road that would lead to wildly different outcomes. While Pokemon obviously owns the designs of Eevee and their Eeveelutions, they don't own the concept of branching paths. Not even the concept of having different designs due to following different skill trees. There's more to talk about Eevee, but if I were to have a design that is known for having multiple branching paths in my science-themed creature collector, what science concept would I reference? What if Eevee was STEM cell? Alright, so this STEM has nothing to do with the acronym science, tech, engineering, math. They're called stem cells because they are the cells that the different cell types stem off of. In other words, stem cells have the ability to become different types of cells. It's called differentiating into other cells. The stem cells that could only turn into a small range of cell types are called multipotent. Stem cells that have access to all the cell types an embryo needs are called pluripotent. And those that can give rise to a whole embryo themselves are called totipotent. So I already shared the design on stem cells before, where I had a regional Wooper and even a new evolution, becoming a stem cell researcher. However, since then, I've been committed to make my own independent project, so I can't reference Wooper anymore. Pokemon owns Wooper, but Pokemon doesn't own the axolotl, an animal that is known for their regenerative abilities. If an axolotl loses a limb, their skin comes together to actually make new multipotent stem cells to regrow that limb. They can even regenerate internal organs, and even their spinal cord. So yeah, researchers have been studying axolotls to learn more about stem cells and regenerative medicine. And now I can introduce you to Stemodel, a pure chroma type. Basically a type of pretty colors, full of hope, kinda like a light type. That's a topic for another discussion. Also, all the abilities here are in Pokemon's terms. I'll change up the names and or effects when it come around to making that part of my game. But yeah, this baby will have evolutions that will specialize into different niches. So speaking of evolutions, instead of letting the stem cell grow into just more stem cells, I might as well represent how stem cells can differentiate into different cell types. We're going pluripotent, baby, because if Stemodel has a majority of moves that are neurotype, they become neurodal, a neuron. These are the kind of cells that make up your nerves and brain to send electrical signals across your body. The dendrites of a neuron receive an electrical signal and send it down the axon. The little covers on the axon are called the myelin sheaths, which are made by the Schwann cells around them. It's full of fat and it lets the electrical signal to go by quickly down toward the axon's terminals that would go on to trigger another neuron's dendrites. Depending on the neuron's type, the overall structure could change, and while Neurodal's design alone doesn't cover that difference, I have a previous set of designs going over them with more detail. Neurodal here looks more like a motor neuron, which are neurons that trigger muscle tissue, allowing you to move. Speaking of muscle tissue, if Stemodel knows a majority of Forta moves, here's myodal. Myo as a prefix means muscle. So muscle cells are called myocytes, and they are organized in fibers that can contract or relax. Like how there's different kinds of neurons, there's also different kinds of muscle cells: skeletal, smooth, and cardiac. While myodal is mostly representing a skeletal muscle, I did try to reference how cardiac muscle in your heart has a branch pattern with myodal's chest. Smooth muscle are used in the lining of organs, and it has this spindle shape, which I tried to incorporate in other parts of myodal. Ideally, I'll have another line just going over the different muscle cell types, but for now, let's just focus on Stemodel's family. For you see, I was just thinking of making it a three-way branch: a neuron, myocyte, and just more stem cells. However, there's an issue with that. I've already had creatures that branch into two designs, and compared to them, having three choices doesn't feel that special. And Pokemon had a similar issue. In Generation 1, Eevee was the only Pokemon line to have multiple evolutions. I guess if you count Nidoran male and female to be the same Pokemon, then they technically have a bifurcation. But Pokemon didn't count them as the same, so Eevee was truly the one Pokemon that gave the player a choice in what they could become. But by the second generation, a lot more lines have gained new evolutions and new branching evolutions. Eevee doesn't feel that special anymore. So in that same generation, Eevee also gained a pair of new Eeveelutions, achieved by the new mechanics introduced in that game, with a total of 5 choices towering over everyone else. Designer Atsuko Nishida would end up designing all the other additional Eeveelutions, ultimately giving Eevee a whopping total of 8 branching choices, which remains to be the most number of different Pokemon one can evolve into. I mean, recently we did have Applin getting a 3rd evolution, which further evolved into Hydrapple. Is a very unique line of evolutions, but they're still a long ways away from Eevee's status. So as these other Eeveelutions were added, many of them adopted similar feline bases. And while this whole line has become quite an iconic family, I was thinking how the structure was an opportunity to go wild with the choices. So I removed that stem cell evolution, the one where Stemodel just grows into more stem cells, because I wanted to make room for not a bifurcation, not a trifurcation, but a pentafurcation, giving Stemodel 5 completely different choices. So if Stemodel knows a majority of Phasma moves, they can become Dermodel, who is a ghost because they are covered in dead skin cells, as the top layers of our epidermis are dead skin cells that are shedded off every day. Now there's a lot of details to go over in the anatomy of skin. Skin is the largest organs of a human after all, so basically the big general layers are the epidermis, dermis, and hypodermis, where epi means above, hypo is below. Hypodermis is mostly fat tissues, dermis has sweat glands and hair, and epidermis has a bunch of flattened cells. Dermodel here is mostly a cell in the epidermis, but I'll provide extra links providing more detail to these topics down in the description. Next, I gave Stemodel a Metalla evolution with Osteodal. Why Metalla instead of my Geotype? Mostly because I already have too many Geotypes. And if you noticed, every member of the Stemodel family has types that end with an A, like Neura and Forta, instead of an O, like Geo or Hydro. I just like to keep some patterns for now. But yeah, the prefix osteo means bone, so a bone cell is called an osteocyte, looks like this, and most of these osteocytes maintain bone tissue. There are some special cells like osteoblasts, which build new bone tissue, and osteoclasts, which break down bone tissue. Also, osteotl here looks kind of like the horned devil lizard, which are known to shoot blood out of their eyes. And coincidentally, bones are responsible for making blood. Blood is made from the inside of the bone, called the bone marrow, so osteotl should be able to shoot out blood! Oh gosh! Okay, so I gave Stemotl one last evolution, this time based off of adipose cells. Adipose is a prefix of fatty tissue, so adipocytes are cells that store fat. Here's Adipotl. I called this one a toxic type just because it's currently the type that's supposed to oppose water, and oil and water don't mix. There's also different kinds of fat cells, white and brown fat cells. In the latter, the fat reservoir is cut up into multiple globs and has more mitochondria to make energy to keep your body warm. Brown fat cells can be made from white fat cells when the body is exposed to cold temperatures. And there you have it, Stemma's only pentafurcating family, Stemotl. It's definitely fun to mess around with the structure of what an evolution line could be, so I wonder what other lines we could see in the future. Either way, if you're interested in my project or like these kind of videos, subscribe and share this video. I've been working on Stemma and amassed quite a roster, which I hope I could present in a game one day. It's a slow process, but I've been leaving devlogs for the highest tier of my Patreon members. With that said, thank you to all my Patreon members for directly supporting me, and thank you for making the choice to watch this video. Have a great one.